Casmium believes every young athlete deserves a shot at greatness. By making data analytics accessible and easy, they provide a new way for coaches and athletes to improve their game. Casmium's digital scoring app, all-in-one stats, and chart software enable teams to quickly and easily find new ways to strategize and harness the power of data. Join Casmium in revolutionizing the world of youth sports with tools that make a difference. Schedule a software demo or sign up today at Casmium.com. Casmium, where sports technology sparks victory.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Ryan Glick, co-founder and CEO of Groove. And if you're a real estate professional, I have something I think you're going to be interested in. We've developed a platform that's transforming the way deals are prospected and managed in the real estate world. With Groove, you can organize real estate data in one place and share real estate deals with just one click. Join other real estate pros and reclaim up to 90% of your time. Head over to letsgroove.com/signup and start your free trial today.
Do you ever ask yourself, how would my life be different if I had made different choices? Would I be happier? More wealthy? Here's a humorous novel that explores that question, venturing back to that magical time in the early 90s when grunge was taking over big hair bands. It was just when our hero, Amy Gare, began to face the real world. You Hawkeye fans just might enjoy the setting as well. Goodbye Def Leppard, I'll Miss Those Jeans by Steph Kramer can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it's free for Kindle Unlimited subscribers. I want to thank Iowa Smokehouse for being part of our coverage throughout Hawkeye football season once again. Iowa Smokehouse, iowasmokehouse.com, Iowa Smokehouse at your grocery store, at your local convenience store. It's everywhere. Iowa Smokehouse, tasting is believing. Use the code Hawkeyes15, or excuse me, just the code Hawkeyes. I'm getting my codes mixed up this evening. Use the code Hawkeyes to get 15% off your order, and you can make your purchases now. You still have a window, folks, before the end of the regular season to get your orders in and get it sent right to your doorstep. Their country-style bacon meat sticks, as you see pictured here, their steak bites, their jerky, everything is delicious. Maybe you're not a cured meats person. Maybe you like their salsa, their barbecue sauces, their ketchups. Great stuff, folks, especially as we get into the colder months and you don't want to have to go outside for snacking products on game day or any day. Check out the selection they have to offer over at iowasmokehouse.com. And again, that code is Hawkeyes for 15% off. Also, we want to thank Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. Brad has been with us for several seasons, and we appreciate his support. And should show your appreciation for the support he's given to this show. Be sure you call him for an absolutely free quote, 515-256-6480, offering great competitive rates and awesome coverage on policies like homeowners, renters, auto, motorcycle, boat, all those and more. Call him at 515-256-6480, or you can check out what his team can offer you at bradvanmeter.com. That's www.bradvanmeter.com. We appreciate Brad Van Meter at State Farm in Des Moines. And without further ado, we welcome a good friend of mine, a good friend of ours. Coach Don Patterson is with us on a Sunday evening. We always appreciate these rare Sunday shows, Don, because they're unique in a number of facets. It means that either you've been traveling to either West Point or Macomb, or you were covering a Missouri Valley Conference game for the television broadcast, and that is what happened yesterday. You were on the call for a pretty big game between Illinois State and UNI, and I'm anxious to hear what happened there. Obviously, the FCS playoff bracket came out, but I also want to get your take on Iowa's win yesterday with the 29-13 victory over the Terps. I guess let's start with the broadcast yesterday. How'd everything go? I understand you were in Kansas City for that game, or did you make your trip over to DeKalb?
This was in Bloomington. Yep. Illinois State's in Bloomington normal.
Where's DeKalb? What's DeKalb?
That's Northern.
Northern. Man, I get those two FCS schools mixed up. Northern Illinois is not an FCS school. I don't know what I'm thinking. Anyways, how'd your broadcast go, Don? It had to have been a bittersweet game for everybody involved. Obviously, you have a guy in Mark Farley who is on his way out, right? And my understanding is that was his final game as head coach of that program.
And did have the privilege of doing the Northern Iowa game last weekend, the first game after his announced retirement, and talking to Mark, of course, in preparation for the game. So had a good chance to reminisce. I did mention to him, I said, I don't know how many times we played. I haven't gone back to look. And I'm not going to because I'm afraid you might have beaten us more often than we beat you. But it was a really good series that we had with you and I. Back then, back in the early 2000s, you and I was one of the best teams in the Gateway, as we called it back then. And, of course, we were also one of the best teams. So we had some really good games against them. And Mark's a good man. I hate to see him go, but we all have our amount of time in the spotlight, and it's time for Mark to bow out, I guess.
What are you most excited about when you look at the FCS bracket that was released this weekend?
Well, it's pretty impressive what the Missouri Valley's done. They've got the number 2 seed, the number 3 seed, and the number 4 seed. It's amazing that we can be that dominant. And of course, that doesn't even include Illinois State. I'm not sure what their seed number is, but they were hoping to play in Des Moines against Drake. No such luck. They have the state high school playoffs at Illinois State this next weekend. And for that reason, they'd committed the stadium to playoff games. And that meant, of course, they had to travel in round 1. Hoping to go to Des Moines, didn't happen. They have to play Southeast Missouri in Cape Girardeau, and that's a more difficult trip than a simple drive down Interstate 80.
Don, what did you think of the game yesterday, the Iowa game? You've been able to watch it back, and I'm sure I know you approach the rewatch of the Iowa game differently than, you can approach this show differently, I guess, than when we do kind of a live instant reaction type of post game on Saturdays. And, there was some mixed responses to yesterday's game. And Kyle and I had the privilege of chatting for the better part of 2 hours about the result. And, it's interesting how when a season doesn't go quite to the expectations or goals that you as a fan or as a program want it to go, it sort of divides the fan base a little bit, I think. And it's not just me and Kyle. There's always going to be part of the fan base that sort of checks out. And then there's part of the fan base that, they just love each Saturday so much that a win is a win no matter what it looks like and no matter what your record is to that point. And I try to be kind of the in-between. Like the goals are the goals, and there should be disappointment when you fail to meet those goals. And yes, the last 2 games of the regular season, because of what's happened to this point, in my opinion, become less important to the fan base, or at least to me as the average fan. But I'm still engaged. I'm still watching. I'm happy to see a win. I would like to see certain things, given the situation, maybe stylistically change when you've already accumulated 4 losses. But the bottom line is Iowa got the job done yesterday in pretty impressive fashion. They dominate on the ground behind yet another big day out of Caleb Johnson. Caleb finished the day with 164 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He now breaks Sean Green's record for most touchdowns, rushing touchdowns in a single season in Hawkeye football history. So congratulations to Caleb Johnson on that feat. But what were your big takeaways from yesterday, other than pretty routine and a spectacular day from special teams, specifically Drew Stevens?
Yeah, you're right. Well, going into the game, let's talk about analytics for a minute, Corey. One of the things I did, I went back and looked at the 6 teams in the conference that had all beaten Maryland. And I was hoping to find one or more parameters in which all 6 teams had beaten Maryland. And obviously that'd be a good blueprint for success versus Maryland. There were 2. One was simply to outrush Maryland. All 6 of them had done that and winning the game. And the other one was to win the second quarter. And I'm happy to report we outrushed them more than 2.5 to 1. And of course, we won the second quarter 10-0 also. So we can join that elite group of 6 that have all beaten Maryland. Now there's 7 of us.
Don, what did you think about Drew Stevens? How good was that kid yesterday?
Well, I think we're going to get to see him kick on Sunday. That's what I think.
Yep, absolutely.
I know you feel that way too.
Yep.
I found myself looking at all 5 field goals and thinking, why couldn't the 49-yarder have been from 50 or 51? Then he would have been the only kicker in Iowa history, I'm sure, to have 3 field goals in one game beyond 50 yards or 50 or more. One was only 49. Of course, you're going to tell me, and you're correct, even the 54-yarder would have been good from, I'm not going to say 70.
The TV broadcast, did you listen to the TV broadcast? They said the one guy was like, oh, that'd have been good from 70.
That's because he's been talking to you, Corey.
Yeah, he's been talking to me. Oh.
It would have been good from 65, I think. How's that?
Yeah, I'll take it. I'd like to see him. Don't you want to kind of see him get a shot from 65 this year? I just want to see that. I just want to see what happens. Give him a shot. Maybe wind at your back from 65 plus. I want to see how close it is. Real game situation, because man, the kid just kicks. They're like rockets, Don. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody kick almost so effortlessly from any distance. And he's missed some, but they haven't been short or shanked.
Yeah, I can equate it to a golfer. As you know, the big hitters on the PGA Tour, it doesn't appear that they swing that hard. They just hit the ball pure every time. And that's what he does. He hits the ball pure. He makes contact with the ball the ideal way each and every time. It's rare when he misses it at all.
One of my questions I had yesterday after the game, and I think it's a fair storyline to start talking about, is, this team loses a lot, after Friday and after the bowl game. They may lose a ton after Friday because, as you know, like it or not, transfer portal opens, the window opens, and so guys are going to either opt out or leave, declare for the draft before the bowl game, and that is what it is. I'm not, we can have a discussion about whether that's good for the sport or not. Obviously, I think we probably both agree on the answer to that question, but the bottom line is we may see one more game where Iowa's basically all together, and then there may be a number of opt-outs, etc. I'm curious about draft stock for kickers because Drew Stevens is not one of those guys we've talked about as being a potential departure because kickers just don't normally leave early. And
Right.
Iowa, I'm trying to think of the last time a starting Iowa kicker left via the transfer portal. It hasn't happened since the inception of the transfer portal, I can tell you that. And there are plenty of schools, as you know, Mark. Wow, I don't think I've ever done that before. As you know, Don, there are plenty of schools that are consistently trying to poach. And that's going to happen at kicker. It's going to happen at punter. It's going to happen at a number of positions. So there's
Sure.
always that risk that a guy gets poached off of your roster. But as it relates to Drew Stevens' NFL prospects, is there any way, in your opinion, that he could look at his draft stock and say, it can't get much higher based on the season I just had. I'm projected to be drafted as a kicker. I'm going to leave. Is it possible that he may do that if he just gets great feedback from NFL people?
I'll never say never, I guess, but I would think, knowing the kind of confidence we've shown in Drew, even as a young kicker, that he would be. I'll say it this way: the culture of our program is good, and it's rare when a player. I'll put it this way: it's never easy for a player to decide to leave before his eligibility is done. I think even the guys that opt out for the draft, you don't begrudge them for what they do. Especially when bowl games don't necessarily mean that much. It's another opportunity to play, but good luck finding someone that remembers who won all the bowl games last year. I'm sure even the football nuts can identify the winning team in all those bowl games. But the bottom line, it's a good culture. I think Drew's had a good experience here. I think he certainly enjoys all of his teammates. I think he'll think long and hard about leaving. Next question I have for you, Corey, and I don't study the draft like some people do, but I'm just wondering how often in recent history has a kicker been drafted that highly in the draft?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If he's, I think you can certainly count on probably 3 fingers every year for the last 10 years, the number of kickers that are even drafted. Am I right in saying there are some years where maybe there isn't a kicker drafted? Is that fair?
Well, I'm guessing maybe there's a kicker drafted every year, but maybe it's in the last round. Maybe it's in the 4th, 5th round.
Well,
the very best kickers.
So what I'm saying, Don, is, there's no way you leave if you're not projected to be drafted. But if he somehow got feedback from somebody that said, we think you're going to go 5th or 6th round for sure. Nothing's for sure. That's the hard part about this. But if they say you're a 5th round guy, I'm not trying to discourage Drew from coming back. But what does he bet besides getting a degree and everything? My guess is he's ahead of schedule and he's probably going to graduate before that anyways. But like, what benefit does he have in coming back? Now, I will say this. There's less of a risk of injury for a kicker to come back. He doesn't have to worry. Like here's the deal about Caleb Johnson. We can have that discussion as well if we want to, because this is a Sunday night show. Caleb Johnson, you kind of have to think about longevity of running backs in the league. So I don't blame him one bit for leaving. I didn't blame Sean Green for leaving one bit. Caleb Johnson's stock is as high as it's going to be. It's not going to be higher next year. They lose a lot up front. If anything, that's going to hurt him, in my opinion. And you're going up against a kid from Boise State who likely to go a spot ahead of you. But in general, he's probably not going to be able to move his draft stock. And every year taking the pounding that backs take, I think that should affect a player's decision, their own health. And hey, if I can make an extra $1 million by leaving now as opposed to a year from now, that's an extra $1 million that I'll have for the rest of my life. Hopefully you kind of catch the drift I'm throwing at you, Don. But for a kicker, we've seen guys like Adam Vinatieri and Pat McAfee that kick when they still got gray hair, right? And Pat was a punter, but they're kicking when they have gray hair, and it's not as much of an issue. So I don't expect him to leave, but I'm just saying, like, I could see it potentially happening if he somehow were told, you've had a great year. Here's what could happen. If he's got a great draft stock right now and he's projected to go 4th or 5th round, what if next year he gets hurt, or maybe not hurt, because again, probably injury risk is lower than a typical position player. But what if he comes out next year and kind of struggles a little bit? All of a sudden, you go from 4th or 5th round to basically no chance of being drafted. So is it almost like there's a slim margin for error? He's had such a solid season. If he were to dip off a little bit, it could really kill his stock.
It could. But honestly, I think my guess is the way he feels, in his mind, he can only do better. And I don't even know what his numbers are now. I know he hadn't missed many kicks over the entire season. What are his numbers right now, Corey? Do you know offhand?
Let me pull them up here. So for the season, Drew Stevens, let's see here. He is for 17 of 20.
85%.
36 of 36 on extra points, 17 of 20 field goals. And somebody said this in the chat yesterday. I've yet to confirm this, but I suspect it to be correct. He has not missed a kick inside of 50 all year.
That's not true, I'm pretty sure. In my recollection, one of them that was barely wide right was somewhere in the 40 to 49 yard range, I think.
Okay. Well, that may be right. Well, I'll try to confirm that here, but
I got a pretty good memory for numbers, as you know.
Well, let's just look at this while we're at it. So he missed a kick at Michigan State. Let's see. When did he miss his other kick? He missed a kick at Ohio State, at Michigan State, versus Wisconsin. I guess those would be his 3 misses, right? He's 17 of 20.
Yeah.
So I'll go grab this. Let's take our first caller. We've got our Iowa Smokehouse line open and available. The number to call in is 515-635-1601. 515-635-1601. Let's add Bert. Mr. Bert. Ryan. How you doing, Ryan? Hey, Brett Bielema. I tell you what, Mark tweeted about it. Mark Rogers tweeted about it last night. They're one or two plays away from being a playoff team. Like, go back and what game did they lose now? I'd have to go back and track that, but they're not far off. Resume wise, they're right there, especially with some of the attrition that we saw from playoff contenders this weekend. But anyways, go ahead, Ryan.
Bert's a good coach. He really is.
Where did the name Bert come from? Did he call himself that? Where is that?
I have no idea, honestly, but I'll go with it.
Somebody thought they switched the R's and the E's.
I don't think, here's a name that Coach Patterson probably will understand, Jim Walden. And I don't think they're on each other's Christmas cards or anything. Do you know what that story, Corey?
No.
Don, do you want to say it or should I?
No, you better.
Okay, you know it. When Mr. Bielema finished his 5th year with Iowa as a 5th-year senior, he walked up to Mr. Jim Walden after Hayden once again annihilated Iowa State and said it was a pleasure kicking your ass 5 years in a row. I mean, I can't help but love Bert for that, okay? Now,
that's a true story.
And he also coached for probably the 2 most disdainful teams in the legacy Big Ten I can ever think of, Wisconsin and I don't even want to say the other state because it's such a disgusting place, but I'll give you a hint. It borders us to the east. At least I said Wisconsin out of my mouth. I give Bert some credit. I just wish we could have better choices at the grocery store, as you know, but I will leave it at that.
Yes.
Now,
thank you.
Now, as far as Caleb goes, I thought one of the things that was a little telling, because you still have 3 running backs that run the ball, a decent amount of time. I'm not going to say that we're a 3 running back system because Caleb is obviously heads, far and away number 1. But Moulton and Patterson are certainly guys who get a decent amount of carries. The fact that Caleb ran it 35 times in the Maryland game tells me Kirk probably already knows that we're probably not going to have him in the bowl game. And he's probably just going to run the bejesus out of him, which he did, obviously, in the Maryland game and probably in the Nebraska game. And it'll probably be a wrap.
Real quick, can I interrupt? Don, I just confirmed this. Drew Stevens has not missed a kick from inside of 50.
Wow.
He's perfect inside of 50. All 3 misses have come from 50 plus. Now, I'm tracking this as Bert continues to speak, but Drew Stevens missed a 51-yarder against OSU, and then he missed kicks against, like I said, Michigan State. Let me find the miss against Michigan State. And if I recall, like none of those kicks were that far off. Even the 50-plus misses. It's not like I saw the Conrady kid for Iowa State a few weeks ago kick from 54. He made a 54-yarder against Iowa. He tried one of 50-plus, and it was just like almost went sideways. Some kickers that it takes everything in them to get even the distance on a 50-plus yard kick, and it's just routine for Drew.
I got another thing now that you bring up Drew Stevens, a point about how I think he's an NFL kicker. And the other is, help me with the name, but the top kicker in the country is coming in right behind him. I got a story about that one.
Well,
and it's a really good one.
Real quick, he flipped.
What?
He flipped. He's not coming to Iowa.
I didn't know that.
Did I dream that? Did I dream that? No, I think he flipped, didn't he? Didn't that get announced? What was the kid's name? Scott Starzik, right?
Yes. He didn't flip.
He didn't flip?
No.
Okay.
Well, look it up because I got a great story for you.
Maybe I did dream that. Can you imagine?
Oh, come on, Corey. Don't be the...
Hey, Don, I'm reporting things that literally must have come to me during sleep.
That can be dangerous.
I could tell you this. He visited Michigan, and I have not reached out to anybody since that happened about the recruitment because there's been a lot of chatter about him flipping. I can tell you that. And I know Texas A&M has been on him hard. And, again, Michigan got him up there for a visit. So, yeah, maybe I just totally dreamt that.
Well, here's my story, and let's see if it holds up. But I'm very good friends with a donor who's a high-profile lawyer in Des Moines. And he was in Louisiana and bellied up to the bar next to this kicker's dad. And the kicker, Strizik, is from Woodland, Texas.
Yep.
And the guy told my buddy, the lawyer, that he's the top kicker in his class. And he was looking at Georgia and Texas and, the SEC schools. And he said, you need to really look at Iowa because at Iowa, you'll get a lot of opportunity instead of kicking extra points, et cetera, et cetera. They decided to look at Iowa. And as we all know, he did at least commit. And my lawyer friend from Des Moines, I'm not going to mention his name, but it's Beatty, takes a little credit for putting them that way. Don Beatty.
Well, let me just, I know we keep going back and forth, but I finally got this all figured out, Don. You want to know the 3 kicks that Drew Stevens has missed this year?
Sure.
So Drew Stevens missed a field goal against Wisconsin from 56. He missed a field goal against Michigan State from 58. And he missed a field goal against Ohio State of 51.
That's why I thought it was 47. It was almost in the 40s.
Those three kicks.
And let's not forget, he has a 57-yarder that's not on the books.
That's true. Yeah, he made a 57-yarder, and then they ended up taking a penalty. Good point.
Can I ask Don or Coach Patterson, excuse me, one last question?
Sure.
You know, last night my son and I were sitting around and we looked up Petrus's stats with Utah State, and I think Deacon Hill he's at 48% completion with Utah Tech. And we were just curious how our last quarterbacks did, and we were comparing that with how Stratton has looked. In my opinion, in one half with UCLA and, 10 attempts against Maryland, Stratton looks pretty solid. He looks solid, and he's got a great arm. I guess where I'm kind of going with this is how do you feel we should be using him going forward? Because, okay, maybe Sullivan's the guy next year, but and I'm good with that if that's the case. I like mobility as a quarterback, but Stratton looks like he deserved a little more in the Maryland game than 10 attempts, and we ran the crap out of Caleb Johnson in particular, and we won.
Yeah, you knew that was coming, right? We knew that.
I knew that was coming. Of course I knew that was coming. But I also think Don, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, he can, say what he needs to say. I have a feeling that Don would possibly agree that this guy is worth 20 passes a game downfield a little more because he's got a rocket for an arm. He seems to be reasonably accurate. And do we need to kill our running backs quite this much? You had, 11 carries for Moulton and 5 or 6 for Patterson, with 35 for Caleb. If you run 55-10, all you're begging is to stack the box, right? And I mean, you got a guy who's got an arm, and you don't get to this level without some semblance of accuracy.
Well, wait a minute. The guys you were just ripping a minute ago, Spencer Petras and Deacon Hill, they both got to this level.
With some semblance of accuracy.
Some semblance. But you knew that Kirk, first game of Stratton's career as a starter, and they're on the road.
I don't
running game.
And I don't disagree with, I'm not saying 30 passes a game either. But 7 to 10, there were times where you could throw it 15 yards. And, I guess I look at a guy like Luke Lachey, who I think is an NFL tight end. He gets one target for 9 yards. That's pretty bad.
Well, that's been the case regardless of quarterback play. But, Don, I'll let you answer that. I agree with you, Ryan. For the record, I tweeted it out pregame. I said, and I knew I was going to be it was going to fall on deaf ears, but I tweeted out right before the kickoff. I said, I do not want to see Iowa just throttle Maryland on the ground and a boring game. And then I got ripped by certain people who are Kirk Ferentz apologists because I called it a boring game. Don, it was a boring game.
It was a totally boring game.
Boring. It's boring.
Boring.
And we're all Hawkeye fans here. And I wanted to see him win. And yes, that's number one, right? Get the win. But I'm just saying, in general, if the average fan had a choice between the game we watched on BTN at 11 a.m. on Saturday or any of the other games in that time slot, I guarantee you the average fan ain't watching Maryland, Iowa. It was a boring game. Now, good thing about it is usually even in the boring games, you get good special teams play and defense out of Iowa. That's what you got yesterday. This was a typical Kirk Ferentz, Phil Parker type of game, even with Tim Lester at the helm. But Tim was going to be limited because of the situation at quarterback, and he worked that well, given the confines of, I think, what Kirk Ferentz expected.
Real quick, Don, before I say anything, I just want to leave you with this. I was really proud of TJ Hall, who I've been extremely critical of, with Jamari doing what he did or making that decision. He played really well. I'm excited about Fred Russell's nephew. And, it was a very difficult week for Iowa, and I thought they responded fantastic. I don't want to come off as negative. If we have to win that way, we won that way. I just want to see Jackson Stratton. And I want to also know if Jackson Stratton is possibly going to get a look as the future, if not next year, the year after. Thank you, guys.
Ryan, real quick, Ryan, don't log off yet. John says the game was not boring. It was beautiful. And
it was beautiful and boring, which is most of Iowa's wins. Let's face it.
I agree.
I mean, I'll take 13-10. I'll take 6-4, like Penn State in 2004 when Robbie Gould blew 3 field goals. But I'll take it. I'm not complaining. But at some point, you can't always win that way. You're not going to beat the big dogs that way. You're going to beat Maryland that way.
Hey, Iowa, Penn State 2021, that win in Kinnick, that was boring in general. Like, it was there's not, when you have low-scoring games and just dominated by defense and field position, that's boring football.
And how did we win that game, Corey? How do we win that game? By throwing it to Reganey 40 yards down the field.
That was the
one. We took a shot, and that was the difference because we took a shot. And that's my problem with Iowa football. We don't throw past 10 yards. I mean, it's rare.
It doesn't make you an enemy to the state to say that an Iowa game was boring. Like, that doesn't mean you're not a Hawkeye fan. It just, relatively speaking, it was boring. It was a boring game, and I expected it. And you can't expect Kirk to really do anything different. He's concerned about winning the game. That was just like the Wisconsin game last year. I remember having this conversation on the air, Ryan. It was the best way to handle the situation, and certainly with the quarterback situation. Just like last year when you bring Deacon Hill into Madison, hey, man, just run the football. Make sure you're dominant with your punter, Torrey Taylor, and you won't get the win. And that's what they knew. They had that yesterday. We're going to kick long field goals. We're going to play the field position game. When it's 4th and a half yard, we're going to punt. We've seen it over and over again. And I'm not critical of it. I'm just saying it was boring. That's my opinion. Anyways,
last thing I'm just going to say is Kirk is 2 away from Woody Hayes tying. So if he wins the bowl game in Nebraska, he'll go into next year tied. He'll break it next year. Is that it? What do you think? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Well, you want to start with that one, Don, and then we can return to his question about Stratton.
Well, first off, the numbers to be correct. Stratton threw 14 passes. He was 7 for 10 at the half.
7 for 10 at halftime.
Yeah. I didn't have any issues with running the ball. Let me get my numbers straight. Running the ball 58 times. And incidentally, that's the most since 2017. 58 rushing attempts. I'll put it this way. If you run the ball 58 times, I bet if you want to chart that out, anybody that gets to run the ball that many times, there's a high percentage of wins associated with that many rushes. So I didn't have any issue being up on them. We were playing solid defense. They were struggling with either quarterback. And, of course, we haven't talked about Edwards. He's got a thumb issue. And I will say we were probably lucky that we didn't see Edwards all day, a healthy Edwards. That would have made it harder, I think. But the bottom line, we did a great job of burning clock, and we did a great job of just running the ball down their throat. It wasn't quite that decisive, I guess you could say. You'll find this interesting. You know the longest carry that Caleb had? If I'm not mistaken, I think it was 13 yards.
13 yards. Yeah, Kamari had the 68-yarder.
Yeah. So we weren't 4-yarding them to death. We were 6-yard and 8-yarding them to death. And others over 10. It was fun to see. The best one he had all day long gained 7. You remember the play where he stiff-armed not 1 but 2 guys?
Yeah.
That was a gain of 7. That was a great run.
And there were a couple.
And he drew a flag for a hit out of bounds at the end of the play. After stiff-arming 2 guys, he got funneled off the field. They hit him late. We got another 15 yards. So I didn't have any issues with the game being played out in a conservative manner because the thing that was interesting to me is that Tim did a good job of not asking our quarterback to do too much.
Yeah.
And sadly for Maryland fans, Maryland was more than happy to cooperate. Most of the time we had off coverage, and you think about it, probably half or more of the throws were simple stop routes, out routes, high percentage throws. And as you know, Stratton can wing a ball, and he throws with good accuracy. He's just got nice, natural throwing motion. Seems to throw with good accuracy. If it's not a complicated read, for sure he's able to take his steps, drop back, and put the ball on target. He's done that a lot and done it pretty well.
Is it fair to say he's probably not your average walk-on quarterback at Iowa?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah.
I did talk to him.
You know that I was intrigued by him preseason, Don, heading into fall camp because he was a scholarship guy at a scholarship guy at an FBS school. And at one time he was committed to Washington before they made a coaching change. Most of the time, Iowa gets a quarterback, a walk-on quarterback. They're not a scholarship guy somewhere else, or certainly at one time committed to a P5 school.
Right. You know, the thing that sticks in my mind, Tim did have a chance to watch Jackson practice in Southern California, see him in person. You can learn a lot just by being able to watch a guy. If nothing else, you can assess his natural ability to throw a football. Some guys have a knack for it, others not so much, but he has good natural ability. And he's a pretty good athlete, I think. You know who he reminds me a lot of? Another former quarterback for Kirk. He reminds me a little bit of C.J. Beathard.
Is that because of the hair? Is that because of the hair?
I'm not saying C.J. Beathard, but he's not that impressive to look at, but he plays better than he looks.
C.J. was very mobile. I mean, that's the one thing. I don't know that Jackson has the mobility. I had a conversation with Jackson in August because I did. I thought it was an intriguing storyline. So I talked to Jackson in August. I believe I was the only one to request, you have to make your media day player interview requests in advance. I believe I'd have to go back and look. I think I was the only one that requested Jackson Stratton. So anyways, Jackson is a funny kid. I know I asked a couple of his teammates about him. And who was it that I asked about Jackson? It might have been Marco Linez. I may have asked Marco about what he thought of Jackson, and the response was he's a goofball. He's got a hilarious sense of humor. And now we know he's nicknamed Shaggy in tribute to Scooby-Doo, a Scooby-Doo character. He does kind of have that look, and he does have an arm. I mean, that's why I say I don't think he's your average walk-on. Don, there's a good question here in the chat that's worth addressing, and that is, does Stratton end up earning a scholarship? And I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, if he comes out and balls out Friday and looks really good, I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more against the Huskers. What's the answer to that?
I'll make a prediction. If we don't offer him a scholarship, he'll go somewhere else with a scholarship.
Right.
So if we want to keep him, we're probably going to need to offer him a scholarship. I don't think we'll be able to keep him otherwise because somebody else will offer him one.
And Don, Aiden wants to know how many times does he have to throw on Friday to beat the Huskers?
More than 14, I promise.
You want to take a stab at it? Does he need to throw it 25 times? Probably not. They should be able to win. They should be able to win this game, knock on wood, home game against a Husker team that has already clinched bowl eligibility. I would think that this rushing attack, if they play it apart, they've had games like the UCLA game where they just totally lay an egg on the ground. But if that offensive line, Joe Moore, semifinalists or whatever they are, can run the ball effectively, he should not have to throw for more than 20.
Well, I think it's entirely possible we'll need to throw more than 20 times to beat Nebraska.
Well,
Maybe
possible.
not. It's entirely possible, yeah. The bottom line, I don't think there's any way we're going to run through Nebraska like we ran through Maryland. I think Nebraska's front seven is better than Maryland's.
Okay.
And I'm no expert on Nebraska, but I've seen them play enough to have that kind of general sense that we're not going to be able to run the ball down their throat. I don't think.
And Space Boy wants to know, can we beat Nebraska without passing over 100 yards? Have not passed 100 for 2 straight games, and that's become a habit, not just this season, but in recent years. Now, circumstances are different. I understand this year the circumstances are different. They got a dominant run game that they can lean on, and they've had a ton of injury problems at quarterback. Cade was hurt last year, but they also didn't really have a consistent rushing attack all year long. They had certain games where they'd knock off some big ones. But, yeah, I mean, what's the number? How many passing yards do you need against Nebraska? I know it's probably a harder question than asking you how many rush yards they need.
Yeah, there's so many variables to that. I'll put it this way. If we don't throw for 150, that'll probably be a concern because my guess is we're going to have to throw the ball certainly more than 14 times. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we throw 20-something times. So 20 attempts, 150 yards, that's 7.5 yards per attempt. Assuming none of those are intercepted, that's not a bad average. 7.5 yards per pass attempt. That would hold up pretty well against most teams, and that's assuming that you're able to run the ball to complement that passing game that you do have.
Folks, our RTI Threads player of the game yesterday was none other than Drew Stevens. I think, Don, you and I probably would have agreed on this post game. Drew Stevens, 5 of 5, and makes from 26, 27, 49, 50, and 54. He's perfect on extra points for the year, including 2 yesterday. Also had a tackle on a kick return, and that got the whole team fired up without question. And folks, be sure to check out RTI Threads and their NIL apparel, their NIL line of apparel, I should say. Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, all featured. Great gifts for your kids, for your parents, fellow friends, Hawkeye friends, or for yourself. Check it all out. RTIthreads.com/NIL. RTIthreads.com/NIL. All right, let's go to our next Iowa Smokehouse caller. OS for Hawks is with us. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, gentlemen. Hey, Coach.
What's up?
It's good talking to you. I don't know if Corey remembers. There was one question I wanted to ask you, and do you remember what it was, Corey?
No, not a chance.
Oh, see, so it's a good thing that I showed up because the only way I'd get my question answered is if I showed.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you, Coach, about Felton's second touchdown where he ran it into the corner by the pylon and what was going on with the defense there, because it looked to me, and I don't to say that Wampa was upset, but I think Wampa was looking at, hey, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be my responsibility on that because he was rushing out. Or if it was, then Wampa's the one kind of failed there because, let's face it, Felton, he shouldn't be open like that. I mean, he's their number one receiver, especially in a red zone situation.
Right. I would say this. It was a trips formation, and number one and number two, let me explain what I mean when I say number one, number two. Number one's the widest of the three. Number two is the next man in. Number three was Felton, right? He was the most inside of those three receivers.
Yes.
Both 1 and 2 were covered with man defenders. In other words, those two guys understood that we're in man defense. The third man was not covered by any man defender. And for the record, I believe it was Fisher that was lined up on him. I can't recall. It was a linebacker.
Yes. Yeah, it was Fisher. Yep.
Yeah. And obviously that's not a good idea to put a linebacker man-to-man on Felton. I guess you might argue down the goal line it's a risk you need to take. But the bottom line, it was a bust on the part of someone. I don't know who that someone was. But since number one and number two were being played in a man-to-man defense posture, then you'd have to assume both those guys had it right, and we busted on number three. And that happened to be the guy that was wide open in the front of the end zone.
Yeah, and that answers my question because I thought the Felton there had to be kind of a busted coverage, and that it kind
Yeah.
of explains it. And you did explain it exactly as I saw the play unfold. I just wanted to also say that I mean we've got to think KJ's leaving, right? He's not staying
Yes.
for another season.
Yes. I don't
Yeah,
see any way he comes back.
yeah. The now I'm forgetting the other thing that I was going to talk about, but that's what happens when I get older.
You're welcome to.
Just when I mention it's only going to get worse too, because I'm pretty sure I'm older.
Well, yeah, a little bit older. I am. I just retired last year, so I'm of that age. But um, oh, I know what I was. Oh, now I remember. I was going to ask a question about, and this is just play calling question, but I, I keep thinking that we should run some sort of play action fake with Caleb Johnson in the backfield going deep. And we don't ever seem to do that because the defense has got to be keen on Caleb, don't they?
Well, they're not. Well, this is a question for Don, but real quick, can I just say they're not really throwing play action much at all.
Well, that's
I
true,
mean,
but yeah.
I think the quarterback situation has been so up and down. Like you don't even from game to game who's playing right for how many straight weeks now? Four straight games or whatever it's been. So I think that's kind of part of it. But I agree, certainly with Jackson's arm, Don, against Nebraska, let it fly.
Or are they keeping that in their pocket for one last game?
Well, they have one last game.
Yeah.
Well, most of the play action that involves a fake to Caleb Johnson would be what they were describing on TV as a mid zone scheme. We're running for some width with the ball, typically at the tight end's position or imaginary tight end, or maybe a little tighter along the path that running to the tackle's original alignment. And with that wider path on the part of the back, the best play action in general that we've used with good effectiveness is naked. We would naked away. We made 14 yards with a naked. I believe that was a naked thrown yesterday, wasn't it? To Orwood? I think that was a naked. I have to check my notes. What did Orwood catch? Didn't he have a 14-yarder, Corey, or am I crazy?
I thought
I tied in a 14-yard reception.
that was a stringo,
It
wasn't
was
it?
a stringer.
Stringer.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it was a stringer. Yes.
Wasn't that a naked? I think it was a naked.
Yes.
May have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the problem, the very best play actions that we used to have, but we were in the center, and of course the running back was lined up at maybe 8 yards depth, and he's got time to run downhill at the line of scrimmage, and of course that gives those safeties a little more time to commit to the run, and that's why you used to see us with play action post a lot of the time because the safeties were caught too low and couldn't recover in time. So it would be more effective to fake and stay in the pocket and throw the ball if we were taking the ball off the line of scrimmage, from a direct snap. The problem there's not a lot of problems with shotgun, but one problem is the play action doesn't have the same great effect as if you take the ball from the line of scrimmage, you're taking it back to the running back who's lined up in the eye. And so you have a chance to really affect a good fake, and the play takes a little bit longer. The play action would buy you more time and give you a better chance to beat the safeties over the top. I would say that. That's one reason you don't see a lot of play action down the field from us is because we run so much outside zone or what they were calling mid zone, a little wider path by the back. And if we start off with that kind of width on the fake, then even if we are underneath the center, then we typically use naked away.
That's
To get our.
That's one of the reasons we have you here, Don. You just explained something that 90% of the fan base probably would not have been able to explain. So,
Well, that's one thing I used to like about being underneath the center is you had a chance to really come up with some good play action.
right.
Gentlemen, again, I thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it. One last thing, we got to win Friday night because I have too many Nebraska fans in my circle to have to put up with that if we don't win. So go Hawks.
Amen.
And you gentlemen I hope everyone out there has a wonderful Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, my family, my brother is recovering, but he's had a heart issue and they can't travel. And my sister can't travel either. So we're going to
Well,
be here by ourselves. But I
you're
hope
gonna-
everybody has a wonderful weekend with family.
Appreciate that, and don't forget you got some great sports to watch this weekend. You watch women's basketball, sir?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay. All right.
I
Well,
watched the game yesterday.
Yep, you got a nice doubleheader on let's see, Thursday, Friday, and then the men or the football game Friday. Why? Wait a minute. Are we doing this again? Are we really doing this again? Let me pull this up. We really have a women's game at 5:30 and then a football game at 6:30. What kind of stupidity is that? No, this is the wrong one. No, that's right. No, that's not the one on Friday, but the one on Thursday is at what time? What time is the game on Thursday? The women's game, the BYU game.
I didn't realize the women played on Thursday.
That's ridiculous. They play BYU in Cancun Friday at 8. Now, what sense? I don't understand. Let me just go on a rant for a second. I don't understand how you can't figure out how to stagger these games better. If you're Iowa, you have no control over any of this. Like, I understand that you're at the Big Ten's mercy, but you can't say to the Cancun Challenge, you can't pull some strings and ensure that this game does not interfere or make a change so that it does not interfere. That's stupid. That's stupid.
Is that our first or second game in Cancun?
It's the second game in Cancun, but it's the only game in Cancun against a decent opponent. Rhode Island's not very good. BYU is the big test. They play at 8 p.m. Central Time on Friday. That's stupid.
It is.
Anyways.
I don't even know who's carrying the game, but the bottom line, of course, you can't watch both at one time.
And by the way, let me tell you who's carrying the game. It's flowhoops.com. And so flowhoops.com already asks $30 a month. So if you sign up for $30, you're like, well, at least I'll get 2 games. But a lot of the fan base will say, no, I'm actually only getting 1 game. Because I'm only going to be able to watch 1 game because I'm going to pick football on Saturday night or Friday night. That's stupid. It's bad. That's bad. And I'm not blaming anybody specific, but I'm just saying I can't imagine that Iowa wasn't in a position where they could pull some strings and ensure that doesn't happen. I just cannot believe that. Anyways.
Well, I wonder, do they have the capacity to archive the game? Can it be on demand afterward if you subscribe?
Yeah, people can watch it back on flowhoops.com. But
I'm sure they want to watch it in real time too. Ideally, they watch both basketball and football in real time.
I want to watch it in real time. So now I'm forced to have to go bring a second TV out in the living room, which, by the way, I will do. But ridiculous. So anyways, thank you, sir. Appreciate the phone call. Anything else for Coach?
Nope. Like I said, have a great Thanksgiving, everyone. Good night.
Thank you for a wonderful call.
Absolutely. Yeah, that just burns me up. I didn't even think about it until now. And this has happened before, but there's too much hype around this women's basketball program to do that, to make that happen. I think it's just ridiculous. But anyways, let's go to, let's see. We've got Cyhawk C Money says Stratton has elite accuracy. We have not seen accuracy like this since CJ. I think that's a little hyperbole, Corey, frankly. Not to rip on you, but Don, have you seen enough to say that Stratton is elite with his accuracy?
I wouldn't go quite that far yet. We've had a limited number of pass attempts right now.
We've got just a snapshot. Don, I wanted to let you know that my first viewing on my new iPhone 16 Pro intelligence, I had to utilize it for my chat here with you because you are the symbol of intelligence when it comes to Iowa football. So it's an honor.
Well, you're very kind, Corey. Thank you. And does that mean the Lions won today?
Yes, sir. I had to do my Lions flex. Certainly, they handled the game. They are, and the Detroit Lions, I might add, They just picked up Kayvon Merriweather
Did they really?
as well.
Is Kayvon still? He's hopping around still. So is he? He was signed to the practice squad, I'm assuming.
Yeah. But he was at Tampa. He played special teams at Tampa, but his mom, I mean, they're from, Belleville, Detroit connection. So where Bryce Underwood, the 10 or $12.5 million quarterback that was just flipped to Michigan from LSU, talk about NIL impact, $10 million to $12.5 million to pull him in to Michigan. Anyway, Don, I wanted to ask you this question regarding the boring football game. I thought it was exciting. Okay. I thought what I witnessed was exciting to me as opposed to OS for Hawks. And the reason it was exciting is because I'm going to run the ball at you every single time, and you can't stop me. And you know it's coming, and you can't stop it. And Don, have you ever flexed? That's called Iowa bully ball. That's old school Iowa football right there. That's Joe Moore award-winning offensive line performance. That is manhandling your opponent and moving. Norm Parker or anyone else would appreciate your guy knows exactly what you're going to try to do, and you take him and you move him in the exact opposite direction that he intends to move because it's your will. Do you ever recall flexing a little bit and showing off your offensive line? First off, is my question.
Sure. It's demoralizing, of course, if they're running the ball at you and you can't do anything about it. That's very demoralizing.
And I guess, secondly, if you can do that, then why would you pass the ball? I mean, if you
For the record, I never advocated. I never said that they should. I said I would like to see it. I understand. I knew what Kirk was going to do, and I'm not saying it was the wrong play. I'm just saying, as a fan, I would rather see Jackson Stratton sling it around the field. But as a coach, I totally understand why you're going to do what they did. It was the right game plan, and Tim Lester called a beautiful game within those confines.
And Corey, to your argument, I mean, as far as looking to the future and learning more of what you've got, and as far as Jackson Stratton, I'm in agreement there that it's a good time for growth and for experience to be gained. But at the same time, maybe you don't want to be risking that because your second string quarterback's in a cast. Really.
But the cast on his left hand.
Yeah, they'd be more running Jackson, but yeah, fair enough. But wouldn't that have been kind of cool to see Marco coming out there with a cast on his left arm trying to run quarterback? I think that'd have been amazing to watch, frankly. But anyways, Don, that was his non-throwing arm.
So Don, from the standpoint of you look at Jackson Stratton and you look at you're going to have to help me out. I've been sick for like 3 days. I can't think, but who's our other quarterback? Come on.
Marco Linez.
No. But no, that was starting after.
Brendan.
Oh, Solomon.
Thank you. Sully. After seeing what you've seen in your mind, if you had to predict who's the starting quarterback next year for Iowa with what you know, and you have to answer this question with one person, who would you think that would be?
Well, it's tough because we haven't seen a whole lot of, what's his name again? The nickname?
Sully or Stratton?
Shaggy.
Jackson. We just haven't seen a lot of Jackson yet. I think we'll know more after the next game about Jackson. Sullivan, as you know, played quite a bit for Northwestern last year. I think he learned a valuable lesson against UCLA. The bottom line, you got to protect the ball better. And we talked about him. You remember us talking about the fact that he got stood up. And of course, if you get stood up, you might get stripped. And my screen's all messed up here. What happened? Corey, you still hear me, don't you?
Yeah, we got you.
Loud and clear,
Okay,
Don.
now I'm good. I got everything back. So the bottom line, we don't know enough about Stratton yet to compare them. And I do think that Sullivan is a smart guy. He's going to learn from his mistakes. Obviously, there's a few plays he'd like to have back from UCLA. I think you'd give him the edge in running ability. I do think that Stratton's a good athlete. Jackson's a good athlete. I don't know that he's in the same category as Brendan. I'd give Brendan an edge on athleticism and ability to extend plays. In terms of pure passing, you might give the edge to Jackson because he wings the football. He seems to have a nice groove motion, a nice natural throwing motion. The ball comes out with good velocity, and yet it's still catchable. There was one ball. There was an RPO that was thrown. I believe it was probably an RPO. The ball came out a little bit hot. It was a slant route. And I think it was on our receiver before he realized it. He wasn't able to control it. I didn't know if he got his hands on it. I don't believe he did because it just came in at a high rate of speed, and it was a little too much pace on that particular throw. But anyway, they both have a lot of potential, and of course, Sullivan, to his credit, he's already realized some of that potential because he's got quite a few snaps under his belt, and with Jackson, not quite so many, but he's got a promising future, and I'm glad we have him right now because I told him the truth after that UCLA game. I saw him on the off week, and I said, Jackson, you didn't surprise me. You know what? You played just fine. I was proud of you. And he thanked me, and I said, I'm being serious. The moment did not look too big for you. You went on the field, and you played okay. You didn't cost us a game. You made some good plays while you were in there. So hats off to you. And just so you know, they know Maryland knows a little bit more about you now, too. So you got to up your game to be able to take care of Maryland properly. And he said, I'm ready for that, Coach. And I said, well, good luck to you. Just remember, a wise old coach once told me, you don't work football, you play football. So don't approach it like you're working in a steel mill or in a coal mine. Just go out there and have fun. But you never forget, you got to play with your head, and you also need to play with your heart. So you play with great passion, but you play smart football. The position you play, you've got to be a fast thinker, and you've got to be a good decision maker, and you got to do the right thing as best you can all the time. Very few people have the privilege of touching the football on every play. It's you in the center. That's it. So understand when we say field general, that's what we mean. You gotta push all the right buttons regarding all those 10 teammates that are out there with you.
Yeah,
Keep getting the ball to the guy that deserves it the most. I'll say it that way. Keep distributing the ball to the guy that deserves it the most. And that's where experience comes in. The experienced quarterbacks, of course, know who that person is. Virtually every play of the game, there's no doubt in their mind who deserves it the most. Depends on down and distance, depends on coverage, depends on ability, depends on game situation. It's a pretty complicated decision sometimes, but the great ones make the right decision virtually all the time.
Yeah, and I guess it's a leading question, but the question, this is what I gather, and you tell me if I'm off base, but it seemed like when we started playing against more elite athletes, which I considered some of Michigan State's and UCLA's athletes as on defense as more elite speed than what we had seen this year. I felt like
I'm sorry, Corey, you're cutting out right now. I can't understand your question yet.
Oh, can you hear me now or?
Try again, Corey.
Yeah, now you're back.
Okay. So it seemed like when we played Michigan State and UCLA, Sullivan's speed with his legs didn't give him the advantage that it did in some of the other games. And that's just me, as an observer. So I guess my question to you is, at what point is a more mobile quarterback more valuable versus maybe a slightly more accurate quarterback? And where would you give up on accuracy to gain leg speed that's a little bit better but not elite foot speed? Or would you rather trade that little bit faster quarterback for a little more accurate of a quarterback?
My answer will be based on how well you can protect. If you have great protection, I'd take the passer and not worry so much about ability to extend plays. If your protection was a little bit sketchy, I'd favor the better athlete that can extend plays
And
and make something out of nothing.
Protection against UCLA was bad. They've had some games where pass pro has not been good this year. Can we agree on that, Don?
Yeah, absolutely.
And my final question, Don, is this: when the offensive line, for example, this past weekend, our O-line did some work. Okay, those legs were churning and driving. We ran it how many times?
58.
58.
58 times.
58 times. Had you seen a drop off following a week of heavy work like that in your team's performance the following week? Or say you have a short week, did you typically notice any drop off in your offensive line's performance if you had a really heavy workload one week? Or do you feel like 4 or 5 days is enough time for recovery? Because it just seems like with this team, we went up against UCLA. UCLA had a bye week, whereas we had a short week going into that UCLA game. So it seemed like our O-line was tired that game. The one against Michigan State, I don't know. I don't know if they were coming off of a bye week, but to what degree does a heavy dose of run game maybe work those linemen's legs out to the point where maybe they're not really 100% fresh for the following week?
I think most coaches would tell you it should not have any bearing at all. These guys are in good shape. Coaches are very, very aware of the kind of rest and recovery they need. It should not be an issue from one week to the next.
Simple as that, Don?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, they're going to have a short week this week. Relatively speaking, they've had some weird scheduling stuff. Everybody's dealing with the double bye year. But
the only good news there is Nebraska's week, in theory, is a little bit shorter than ours because they're the ones that have to travel. They don't have to travel a long distance, but they do have to travel.
Cole, appreciate the super chat. Looking forward to the game Saturday. Of course, Cole is a Nebraska fan. Holgorsen seems to have ignited the offense. Coach, do you have experience with Holgorsen? He is, of course, in Iowa. He's got strong Iowa ties, and he had the background with Coach Leach, I believe.
Yeah, down at Iowa Wesleyan, I believe.
Yes.
I really never knew him back in those early days. I have a lot of respect for him because he knows a lot about football, of course. But I talk about it's a crazy day we live in. Think about this: Nebraska makes a change and Wisconsin makes a change, both on offense, right? In season, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I really don't know that much about Dana, other than he's got a good background in offensive football, and that's about all I can say. I've never actually coached against him. I don't believe I have. Maybe I didn't realize it if only because we're both offensive coaches, of course. I'd probably have better awareness of the defensive coordinators I went against through the years than those that happen to be on the other team's offense.
Before we get to our next caller, we got James on hold. Do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, one being Ascent Nutrition. If you have not checked out their great supply of coffee, their pine pollen tincture is great, their humic and fulvic acid. We're featuring their detox bundle right now, their pine needle extract and their humic and fulvic acid. I know a lot of the people that watch this show are guys, and sometimes us as guys don't think about the need to supplement our health with supplements and these different types of products that maybe we leave to our wives or significant others to figure out and supply ourselves with. But take note, folks, because it is important. Obviously, we all want to feel good in the morning and throughout our day. This will help you. We look at these different products, and so many of them help with brain clarity and detox and gut health and these different things that you almost don't realize what type of need you have until you start suffering from these things. So it's like maintaining a car. Maintain your body and better your health. Read about this special bundle that we're featuring here on this show, their pine needle extract and their humic and fulvic acid. And again, not just brain and gut health, but also just immune system function. You can read all about these products. And this is an proud Iowa company. Ascent Nutrition. Lance graduated from the University of Iowa. He's a huge Hawkeye fan, and he's also passionate about more than just football, passionate about helping people's lives and helping people feel better. They've got a 90-day money-back guarantee. Click the link in the description. It's goascentnutrition.com/Hawkeyes, and then use the code Hawkeyes15 for your 15% discount courtesy of Ascent Nutrition and from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Again, that's goascentnutrition.com/Hawkeyes and use the code Hawkeyes15 for 15% off your order. All of their products are organic. They're wild harvested. They're pure. They go through rigorous third-party testing so that you know what you're getting is the best of the best. And, of course, let's not forget about RTI Threads because they are featuring a number of even former Hawkeyes, but current Hawkeyes as well, stars of the future. Here is their website. This is their NIL division. So rtithreads.com/NIL. You can click the link in the description, but you see people like Cooper DeJean, Owen Freeman, Jacob Gill, Peyton Sanford, Zach Lutmer, even the Swarm Baseball partnership that they have invested in. Certainly check it all out at rtithreads.com. Support NIL, support the athlete, support this show, support our sponsors. So many great ways that you can be a part of the cause. Again, rtithreads.com/NIL. And here's a deal right here for you. Subscribe and save 20% off your first order. Again, rtithreads.com/NIL. And of course, Iowa Smokehouse. Tasting is believing with their jerky, their meat sticks, their salsas, their barbecue sauces. It's all delicious. This is the time of year to have great barbecue, meat, all the snacking stuff that you need that gets you through the cold months, the dog days of Iowa winters. Check it all out at iowasmokehouse.com and use the code Hawkeyes here for 15% off your order, folks. If you've been enjoying the coverage throughout the season, I implore you to support our sponsors now because once we hit the end of the regular season, these promotions are gone and the window to really support the cause here on this show might actually run out. So be sure you do that now, folks. Get your orders in now ahead of a busy week, a busy sports week. Visit iowasmokehouse.com. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. And as I mentioned earlier, Brad and his team down at State Farm. That's Brad Van Meter, his office down at 4229 Fluor Drive in Des Moines, or visit him online, bradvanmeter.com. Call him for a free quote at 515-256-6480. Very competitive on homeowners as well as auto, life, etc. Brad Van Meter and his great Hawkeye team down at State Farm in Des Moines. Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We appreciated Corey's call. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line with James. James, welcome back.
Welcome. Sorry, I couldn't get on for the girls' game earlier. I had something going on, but I see they won, and I know that's good for them. That's good for them, to keep that season going the way it's going. But first off, when is the last time we've had two 100-yard rushers in the same, like actual running backs in the same game? I mean, in general, in the same game, but running backs. I know it's been a while, but
good question. Did they maybe do that once or twice with like the
I know they said it's happened before, but I don't remember when it happened. But I know they said it's happened before. I think Wadley might
I
be
was gonna
right.
say like maybe like the Wadley, Kanzeri, Mitchell overlap. Was there maybe a game or two in there? Possible.
I don't know if you can find those stats easy, but that's just something that's interesting to me. Having 200-yard rushers, I know it probably hasn't happened a lot now. If it's happened ever, it probably hasn't happened a lot in Iowa history.
There's a combination that might have happened back in time. How about Cedric Shaw and Tavian Mikes?
Yeah, definitely.
That one
Had
up.
to have happened with them at least a couple times. But I'm saying it's probably not if he just happened a lot, is what I meant, right? Like it's probably happened a couple times, but it's not if he just probably happened a lot, And
I think it's rare.
Yep.
But it's good to see that obviously with Kamari getting going too, because KJ it's probably KJ's last year, so in that aspect you need that guy to lean on for next year, and you don't know what that's going to be like. You don't know what the team's going to look like next year, obviously, but it's good to see that from Kamari and just have a game like that because he's been dying to have that game he's been playing. He's needed that game. He needs to play well and just.
He needed to bounce back from the fumble.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was on him, Don. The fumble was on Kamari, wasn't it? It looked like a fine handoff from Jackson Stratton.
Yes. Well, I guess I don't know for sure. Here's the mindset I always had. If there's an exchange problem, it doesn't matter if it's center and quarterback, when the quarterback's under center, or quarterback and back. Let's not point fingers. Let's treat it as if it's a problem for both of us. Now we have to figure out what went wrong. But in general, you can assign more guilt to one player than the other. I'm not sure. All I had was a TV version, and I think they showed it in a replay, as I recall. But I didn't really try to assign guilt. But in my mind, it's always got to be a collective solution. What could I have done differently to eliminate it, and what could you have done differently to eliminate the possibility also? That's the best way to solve it going forward, of course.
Yeah, we were right. Daniels on Wadley in 2016, what he said. I seen that. I knew it was Wadley at some point. But one thing, so I don't know if you watched, Corey, but Illinois State made the FCS playoffs. They were the 11th seed overall. So obviously, I know we played them early in the year, and we beat them, and it doesn't matter. It's FCS school, but it's just that's something to know too. But
you missed the first part of the show, but Don called that game for Missouri Valley yesterday.
Yeah, I did miss that part. That's why I wasn't here. But it's weird to see. Obviously, Missouri Valley well represented in that, like they always are. But Illinois State's the team we beat in there, so that's at least a cool thing to see. But
absolutely, yeah. And what was I going to mention? There was a comment here from someone regarding. Let's see if I can find it here. Well, first of all, Joe, thank you for this. Appreciate Joe Fitzpatrick being here, reminding everybody. Hit the thumbs up button. Don, we're less than 300 subscribers away from 10,000. So we've been, gnawing at that bone for a while, but we're getting closer. But hit the thumbs up button and appreciate whenever anybody reminds everybody else in the chat to do that, because we got about 130 people here. We wish we had more people here, Don. Part of the problem is the way this season has gone. So whether people want to agree with me about the game being boring, interest has clearly waned. Okay, because it's very rare that we're doing any show, you and me, during the season where we have less than 200 people watching. But that's what we're up against tonight, and we appreciate everybody being here. But I guess that's further proof to what I was talking about earlier. But anyways, go ahead. Anything else, James?
First off, I'm going to say, with the Jamari situation, first off, how do you guys feel like the corners played without having Jamari? Because obviously, he's a vocal leader. He's the senior and out there, at least on the field, right? Like whether he's on the sideline or not, I have no idea. Right, but at least out there on the field with them, right? Like out there, kind of to help them when they're out there getting looks. How do you guys feel like they played?
I thought TJ was really good. Don?
I think you said all the right things this year. I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood the question.
No, like how did they play? Like how did they play the cornerbacks without Jamari out there on the field at least? Like I don't know if Jamari was on the sideline, like teaching, like helping them through that stuff. But I mean, like out there when they're out there.
I was impressed with Deshaun, and I was pleased for TJ also. I think they both showed good improvement. Deshaun, he made a couple of really nice plays in the game, demonstrating a lot of physicality. TJ, of course, one thing first off, let's give TJ a lot of credit for his first career interception. It looked like he was running the route more so than the Maryland receiver. And I did flash back. You heard me say, Corey, his dad has really good hands. And then when I saw the replay, I thought, well, maybe TJ's hands aren't as good as his dad, because I'm just glad that they ruled in his favor, didn't overturn it. It looked like I was concerned that it might be overturned at the time,
I agree.
but thankfully it was not. So I'm glad that they ruled it was an interception, because if they ruled it incomplete, they might not have overturned that either. That's how close the play was.
No, yeah, it's good to see because obviously Jamar is that vocal leader, and that was kind of one thing I was worried about. Not that they would give up plays, just having that vocal leader there. You know, sometimes, especially as corner, somebody's been through it as long as he has, right? Has been through as long, has seen everything pretty much Jamari could see, right? Like, so he understands kind of what to teach those guys, especially when you're out there, right? If you make a mistake, you're like, hey, we're in this, you know, and that. And sometimes not having the out there hurts you. I know you got Quinn and X on the backside, but at corners, sometimes it's a different look than having a safety, you know, because you're getting two different looks thrown at you. So
I thought one thing that was smart, you might not be aware of this, but truthfully, we were stemming a lot of time to two deep coverage. Maybe it looked like we were going to be soft, and then in the end, we were rolling the corners up, letting them defend the flat, and playing two high safeties in behind. And that effectively takes away a lot of short throws, of course. You can't run a simple out route if the corner's sitting on it, or a simple stop route. And that's one reason we had good success. We took away a lot of the high percentage passes, and we forced them to throw the ball more down the field. We wouldn't have been able to do that, except we didn't need to play the safeties down low, because we were defending the run okay with our front. And that helped us to be able to cause them more problems with short throws into the flat.
yeah, definitely for sure. And obviously, you got one more before the bowl game. I know to some people, bowl games don't matter, but it's more football. It's more a chance to get to watch my team play at least. Like, obviously, I would like it to be in a playoff game, you know, but I still got to watch my team play. So at the end of the day, I'll watch my team play no matter what, as much as I can, because that's just one my team, right? But it's going to be good to get practice for these young guys. And I know the transfer portal kind of changes the practice view of, like, people leaving, you know, not have as many practice. Some people are gone in the portal, right? And you don't know what this team's going to look like next year, just with what could be attrition. You know, who could leave, as, like, people go to the draft, and then also who could leave, like, that's on the team that should be back next year, if that makes sense, right? You just don't know how it's going to look. And I think it's the biggest interest. And off kind of, and it's like after Nebraska, I feel like the most interest is like who stays and who doesn't, right? Like, I think that's the most interesting thing.
Real quick, before we let James go, can we do a quick exercise? Because I was talking to Mark about this the other day. Based on our expectations of who leaves and who returns, which is hard to predict, give me who you think will be drafted. I know you're not a draft expert,
right?
But KJ would be a lock, right? Of guy who's going to get drafted.
I think so.
Castro's a lock, right? He's going to be drafted.
I think so.
Yep. Harris, Jamari, I think he'll be drafted somewhere. I think he had a really solid.
Not quite as confident on him, but he has had a good year, no doubt about it.
I think he'll be drafted. You look at the offensive line. I mean,
the two backers.
Well, yeah, Higgins and Jackson, right? Those guys have to be drafted. Both of them. I would be very surprised.
I'd be shocked if Higgins doesn't go in a reasonably high position.
Well, Higgins for sure. Jackson,
mid-round, maybe.
So right there, Caleb Johnson, Castro, Harris, Higgins, Jackson. There's 5.
Well, Shea, I think Shea, even though his numbers aren't great this year, I think the history with Iowa tight ends being good in the NFL is going to help his case.
So Lachey potentially is drafted.
Yeah.
There's 5, and then what about Richmond or Logan Jones?
It's hard to know. What we don't know, Corey, is how many offensive tackles are head and shoulders above Richmond. We don't know that simply because we don't know college football in terms of the draft. We don't know very much at all about tackles.
I know the first round ones who I've heard, but I don't know much about after that. But Richmond's kind of a toss-up. Like, I definitely think he gets a UDFA chance, and I think probably Deontay Craig gets a UDFA chance just because, like, to me, Craig hasn't put a lot of tape out there, but you know what he can do over the 4 years. And I think Deontay Craig, for sure, if he doesn't get drafted, will get an undrafted free agency opportunity at least, right? Like, so what Deontay can do.
Craig is, I think he's been. I don't know about that one.
No, I think you'll get a UDFA chance, though. I think somebody will take a flyer on him because you're not going to pay him that much anyways, and they're not guaranteed contracts. So what's the need to not take a flyer on somebody?
I think Herkett's got a better chance at being drafted than Deontay.
Not drafted. I mean, UDFA.
I think we have to realize it's a high bar just to be drafted.
Yeah.
If you think about all the players that are coming out, and it's not just 125 FBS programs, it's also all those FCS programs. And let's face it, North Dakota State and South Dakota State and Illinois State, they have good players too.
So I'm just looking at these guys. So does Y.A. Black get drafted?
I think it's pretty much a waste of time to discuss it in any kind of specifics because we simply don't know.
No, yeah, for sure.
Well,
I think the ones for sure, probably Jay Higgins, Sebastian, KJ probably are for sure. The rest of the guys you don't really know.
Let me real quick. Richmond Jones, or Colby. Could you get 2 or 3?
I'm not sure any of them are going to be drafted. Now, again, I'm not a draft expert. I don't know.
Is it possible that multiple guys there are drafted? Is it possible that 2 or 3 of the lists I just gave you are drafted?
Sure, it's possible. But
Okay.
let's not forget this. In the late rounds, all 32 teams make mistakes. So, maybe it's a mistake that they draft one of the Iowa players we just talked about, or maybe their mistake was not drafting one of the Iowa players. We simply don't know.
So I guess my point in bringing this up, I just feel like they have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 locks. That's a lot of players right there. And I think we're confident they're going to get at least 5 guys drafted. And that doesn't count Lachey, Y.A. Black, and those 3 offensive linemen. And it doesn't count, say there's some crazy world where Drew Stevens leaves early. Is there anybody else that could leave early that I'm not?
I mean Xavier, but I think X is more out of the team, like transfer portal, than he is NFL draft, if that makes sense.
He's not getting drafted if he leaves.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I think he's more of transfer portal than he drafted. But yours bringing up names, but
I have one, Aaron Graves.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Potentially. I don't think I have no reason to think he will, but I guess my point is kind of what Mark Rogers is saying here in the chat. I mean, that's a lot. It's going to be bittersweet if Iowa gets 6 to 10 guys drafted, because that will be an unreal draft class, Don. And we're going to be looking back saying, what on earth? Like, seriously, it's going to be very similar to 2010 and 2016.
I can see where Mark's coming from, and I'm hoping Mark's listening to us now. I guess he probably is. Because the reality with the schedule we had, we all were optimistic by nature, of course, about Iowa football, but it wasn't that hard of a stretch to think we'd finish 10-2. We knew going to Columbus and winning is a difficult assignment for anyone. But even then, we were allowing for somebody else to knock us off, even though maybe in worst case scenario, it's a 50-50 game for some of these other games. We've got a lot of confidence that we are winning the games that we should have a chance to win. One of the things I've been able to say about Iowa football is that in general, we very seldom beat ourselves. Typically, you have to beat us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
and just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, the prediction models that I use in predicting how the games are going to come out, Corey, this year, we've never been an exception. I'll just give you an example. I've got 7 different prediction models, all of which identify the winning team between 90 and 93% of the time. Right now, we played 72 games in the Big Ten. Those numbers I just talked about were based on 65 games, which is what we had before this past weekend. So here's my point. They're only in the low 90s in terms of predicting the winner, but here's the rest of that story. Iowa has not been an exception in any of their games. In other words, if we earned the win, we won based on parameters. If the other team won the more important parameters, they beat us. We didn't overachieve.
None of them were flukes. In other words,
correct.
Yeah.
We deserve to lose the game based on analytics.
That is what's so maddening, right? That is what's so maddening. And a fair point here from Mark. How can the offense be this much better and the record be 2-3 games worse against similar competition? Did the defense decline that much? Well, the results and the stats say yes, because the defense, I think you have to look at the defense against Michigan State and against UCLA. And
the thing that sticks in my mind about those 2 games, Corey, you remember this just like I do. In the third quarter, we engineered a touchdown drive that tied up both games. And now what I'm thinking is going to happen next, we're going to get a stop on defense. Didn't happen. Both of them went down the field and went back up on us again.
And again, Don, this is a UCLA team that was last in the conference in rushing the football. They average like 70 per game. They get over 200 against Iowa. Then they go right back to the sewer and run for like 50 some against who'd they play, James?
For what?
Who did UCLA play?
USC. They just played US. Oh, Washington. Yeah, Washington. They played USC last night. They played Washington the other.
Yeah, how many yards did they get against USC's defense? Does anybody know?
Not bad. I didn't watch that game, but
yeah, I mean they had 50 some yards rushing against Washington's defense, and then last night against USC, they ran for 111, and they ran for well over 200 against Iowa. That's insane. It's just incredible. It's almost hard to explain. This is the Iowa defense, and so that in answer to Mark's question, yes, they have just the defense has taken that big of a decline and a step back. It has not helped that they've been below what they should be at quarterback, partly due to injury and partly due to Cade just not being very good when he was healthy. But man, with the dominant run game and a bunch of returnees on defense, and as good as they've been so much better on special teams than I think a lot of people expected. I think that preseason we all expected that they had a chance to be really good on special teams. But Drew had finished the year kind of shaky last year. You're trying to replace Torrey Taylor. Reese Dakin's been phenomenal for a freshman. And Drew Stevens has been one of the best kickers nationally. Caden Weegen's been terrific in the return game. It's amazing all they had going for them. That's why it's so frustrating. But anyways, we can talk about this for months.
No. And then one more thing, two more things before I get off. One thing it'd be cool to see kind of like maybe like just who stays, who goes, and just see kind of figure out what the team's going to look like next year. But one more thing, obviously you talked about Holgerson, and obviously Nebraska doesn't need more fuel on the fire, right? They're obviously be ready to go. I hope we're ready to go. But for Holgerson, he's definitely be ready with the whole Iowa ties, and he's being part of the state, he's going to want to probably stick it a little bit, not stick it to us, but just like, he's done a lot in this state as a coach, so it's going to mean a lot to him to come back, and it would mean a lot to him, to be well. So it's going to be something to look out for too on that side. But at least we have film a little bit over it, because like, it's not like, and I think that might be the reason maybe Nebraska played so well is you don't have film over Holgerson as the OC with that group. You know what I mean? Like with that group. And you got to think about that too, where it's like, you never seen him coach that group before, like as the OC. So sometimes your first game usually can be better because nobody knows what it's going to look like, because you haven't seen it because that's the first time with that group, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, James, and appreciate you being here. It's always fun to talk Hawkeyes, and we'll look forward to one more week of football and a bunch of basketball coming up. Yeah,
for sure. And hopefully we can get this one. I want to beat Nebraska more than anybody usually, but it's just good to see. And it's sad to see the seniors go, but, they put in a lot of work, and obviously it'll be the last home game for a lot of them. And it sucks, obviously, but it's a part of sports. You see people go, you see people leave, but a lot of them are putting a lot of work in. One more thing, kind of before I get off, I'll get off, but you can also be important on this because you brought your point up with like LaShawn leaving the team, obviously, like. And Porter leaving the team. I know Jamari's a different situation, but what was your thoughts on the Jamari situation? Like him being hurt and then saying, we're getting ready for the draft kind of thing. And I don't know if he's with the team or not.
He never said he's getting ready for the draft.
That's what they said, I guess. That's what they said for like the people in the media said that, but
yeah, I mean, people are reporting that in the media, but he has not said that publicly. So
yeah, but I mean, him not playing the rest of the time, I mean, that's not bad. But at least is he still with the team that I know of?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know like if he just
doesn't sound like he traveled, but he's
cool
with the team, and maybe he's not going to play because he's hurt and he's trying to prep for the draft, but he has not left the team and opted out.
So. No, I didn't know how that worked, and that's good to see at least, because he's always been somebody, like he said, he said his story before where he's been through a lot, and Kirk's always been there for him. So it's good to see him finish it out. Unfortunately, he can't finish out the way he wants with the injury, but it's just good to see him, last 6 years or 5 or 6 years he was there and everything he put in for the program. So you never hate people like that, when they've done so much for the program. It sucks to see them go out that way. But
James, appreciate you being here, sir. We'll talk to you, one of these days, right? This week.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully, this week for sure. Hopefully, probably after the Nebraska game, more than likely. But it'll be good to see, and go Hawks always. And let's just keep this moving, at least on the basketball side, and football didn't go the way we want. But sometimes that happens, and unfortunately it happened this year with all the seniors we had, and it was down year. But sometimes, that's the sports, right? Sometimes your seasons don't go as you plan, and that's what makes sports fun sometimes.
Absolutely.
Or not fun, I guess, depending on the person you are. But
yeah. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good stuff. Okay, let's go kind of quick fire on these things. Bob says, where's tight end you gone? First year under a new OC, trying to work your way in. They do have a nice room. I think Ortworth and Ostringa, they're going to be just fine filling in those shoes. But yeah, disappointing year statistically from Luke Lachey. And I don't know that that's his fault. He's dealt with some injury and obviously the new system. But anything to add to that, Don?
Well, it is a little bit of a mystery. We haven't gotten the ball to the tight end much in the last few games compared to early season or compared to last year. I'm not sure why. I can't recall. I think UCLA is a good example. I don't recall us running hardly any nakeds versus UCLA. Yep. Or maybe I'm getting confused with Michigan State. I can't remember. But some of the traditional plays that have been effective to tight ends, it didn't seem like we felt that those plays had as much opportunity to be successful. And because we stayed away from them, it seemed. I'm not sure. It's a little bit of a mystery.
Doc P, curious on the transfer from North Dakota O-line guy. You're talking about Cade Borid. No word on his development. Obviously, the last news regarding him was the OWI in the offseason. So we'll hope that he's progressing because he could be the center of the future once Logan Jones is gone. James says, how many yards does Iowa need against Nebraska to beat him? Any idea there, Don?
I'd say it this way. We need to outrush Nebraska and then some. Because I think there's an excellent chance that Nebraska might throw for more yards than us. Probably will. But they'll also probably have more pass attempts. Here's one thing that'll surprise you when you look at the Nebraska-Wisconsin stats. The more effective passing game was actually Wisconsin. Nebraska, I think, threw for a few more yards, but I think they had 38 attempts compared to Wisconsin's 30 attempts. Based on yards per attempt, Wisconsin had the more efficient pass offense than Nebraska.
That's a good stat. Good stuff. Space Boy says, how much of Iowa's playbook do you think Stratton knows comfortably? He's thinking maybe 50%. He just got here late summer.
I'm guessing by now he knows more than that.
Okay.
I don't know that. And the nice thing about it, even if he only knows 50%, there are a lot of plays in that playbook. And truthfully, a game plan probably doesn't involve more than half of them, probably less than half of them. So he'll be able to learn what he needs to know from 1 week to the next. This is a short week, I will admit that. But, there's a lot riding on it. I know a lot of critics would say, not really. Does it really matter if we have 8 wins or 9 wins? Well, it matters to those players a lot. So let's give us a chance to win out. And in that regard, I'm glad we are playing a home game because for what it's worth, we could even be still working on planning. I know it sounds crazy, Corey, but you've heard me tell the story. Coach Fry put his head in the conference room one Friday afternoon when we were playing at home, something he wouldn't do on the road. Of course, we'd be traveling if we were on the road. And he asked me then, we were playing Indiana. He said, you got any concerns? And I said, no, Coach, we're in good shape. I'm just about done with the script for that Friday walkthrough. And he said, do you have any regrets? And what he meant was, is there anything that we left out of the game plan? And I said, yes, I do. I have one regret. And he said, well, tell me about the play. And I did. And it was an exotic. It was a trick play, if you will. And Hayden's response, as you've heard me say, Corey, he said, well, can't we walk through it this afternoon? And I said, yes, Coach, but we haven't practiced it. And he said, well, we have a veteran football team. Let's walk through it. And if all you coaches think the players understand how to execute the play, we may run it anyway. Well, the next day, sure enough, that one play was worth 55 yards. And we never practiced at full speed. So my point is, you can still be developing the game plan even on Friday afternoon. I know that sounds insane to people, but obviously you can adjust it from what you've done during the week. And if you want to emphasize something more on Friday afternoon in a walkthrough, you can do it.
In this case, Thursday afternoon.
In this case, Thursday afternoon. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm good to think about games being on Saturday.
Spaceboy says, I continue to have concerns about play calling late in the half. Deep in Maryland territory, we threw 2 times, then ran on 3rd down, settled for a long field goal. Man, that is Kirk. That's consistent from the Bryant era to now. That's not Tim Lester, because that's all game planning, right? They were not going for it on 4th down. I mean, it's just, especially when you have Drew Stevens, they wanted points. And for the most part, yesterday I thought it was the right call, but I knew a couple of those times they're down in Maryland territory and it's 3rd and 7. It's like, they're probably going to run. I even said that. They're probably going to run the ball here and just ensure that they get those 3 points. And that's what they did.
Yeah. And that was the second field goal, I guess. The field goal to make 13. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 10-0 at the time.
Spaceboy says, what's your opinion of Michigan paying all this money to a 17-year-old Bryce Underwood? Says NIL is getting crazy. Yeah, it's crazy, but that's the world that we live in, and that's the college football sport that we're a part of now. It is what it is. You're not going back.
This is lunacy. It really is. I'll say it this way, Corey. You've heard me say it before. Even the NFL has a salary cap. College football has no salary cap.
Yeah.
What could go wrong? Oh, I don't know. All kinds of things can go wrong. And you've heard me say this, Corey. 20 years ago or 10 years ago, if somebody with enough vision in the NCAA would have been able to say, you know what, we've been describing a full scholarship as tuition, fees, room, and board, books. But now with our revenue increasing exponentially, maybe compared to other times, maybe this is a good time to, and all these coaches' salaries are taking off, maybe this is a good time to explore. Maybe a full ride scholarship should be tuition fees, room and board, books, and a $5,000 payment to each and every player. That would have probably solved our problem for many years to come.
Right.
Simply share the revenue.
It's all the lack of foresight by the NCAA and greed, and that's what it all comes down to. And now we all pay the price for it.
I mean, is it possible? We need to have some kind of control over this, simply to give us the illusion of equal opportunity on the part of all these teams.
Right.
So let me throw this out as one option. Is it possible to say, okay, quarterback, the ceiling you can pay a quarterback is, and let me give you a rational amount. Oh, I don't know. What about tuition fees, room and board, books, and $20,000, $40,000, whatever. A reasonable amount of money.
But Don, how do you do that when the Supreme Court has said that players can make money off their name, image, and likeness? How do you control what a private person pays a quarterback?
Well, first off, can you honestly say they're earning that kind of money off their name, image, likeness?
The law is the law. They can make money. They can get money to do something, whether it's. I mean,
you know what's going to happen, Corey? We're going to end up with a very small group of teams that are defined as big-time college football. I'm talking maybe 20 teams, 30 teams.
What would
no
happen
more than 40
if there was a big Los Angeles Rams fan that wanted to pay somebody $30 million to go play quarterback for them? They can do that. That has nothing to do with salary cap or anything like that. And the NFL and the other NFL teams can't stop that fan, that big money guy from doing that. That's what's happening here. So I just don't know how you, unless it has to go through legislation. There's no way you're going to be able to change that aspect of the game. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and we need a salary cap, but I just don't know how you do that from a legal standpoint.
Well, somebody smarter than you and I needs to figure it out. I'll say that. I don't know how we can solve it.
Somebody's working on it, Don. The voice of college football, Mark, appreciate the super chat. Iowa pass efficiency defense 2020 to 23, 4, 4, 6, 7, and now this season ranked number 41. So that's telling, right? I think that's a pretty telling stat. I think results wise, you're pretty close defensively. Results wise, those stats are telling. So,
and having said that, part of our problem was not our inability to control passing game. It was our inability to slow down the other run game.
Right.
Right.
And
Dave, specifically about Michigan State and UCLA.
David, we appreciate you being a premium subscriber here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. 20 degrees at kickoff, he says. Don, are you going to be there? I'm sure you will.
I will absolutely be there, and I won't miss 1 minute of the game. And I will be properly dressed.
You will be properly dressed. Iowa, Nebraska kicking off at 6:30 on NBC. Let's go to our final Iowa Smokehouse caller of the day.
And by the way, Corey, I'll be out in the crowd. I will not be up in the box. I'll be out in the crowd.
Yep, you will. Before we get to Erica as our last caller of the day, we appreciate RTI Threads, their player of the game this week. Drew Stevens, perfect from field goal range, 26, 27, 49, 50, and 54. By the way, Drew's field goal range is different than almost any other kicker. I'm telling you, I want to see him kick a 65-yarder before his career is up. 2 for 2 on Saturday with extra points, and a tackle also coming on a kick return. And, of course, check out RTI Threads, all their apparel, including that of Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, and more. Visit rtithreads.com. Use the /NIL. That's rtithreads.com/NIL. Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We've got Erica joining us. Erica, welcome back.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, Erica, how are you?
Good. I'm happy with the win, of course. But I'm just wondering, how does next year look? Because I know our schedule's harder, and I just have some hangups because the defense, as Mark pointed out in his super chat, and how everyone's talking about in the chat, and I think you guys are talking about too, our defense is just not what it's been. I don't know if that's a fluke. I don't know how it happened, but
say something encouraging for a second, because I tend to agree with you, Erica. The schedule, it doesn't look good when you look at everything they lose, and then you look at the schedule. But let's look at the other side of this, Don. When Phil Parker has had a down year, and he has had some down years, it's typically not 2 straight down years. And I'm trying to even think when his down years would have been. Probably 17 wasn't the best. I think they were fine in 18. Trying to think in 20. I mean, they had the 1 year where they gave up a number of explosive plays. Was that 2020, Don? Even though they had finished the season giving up, winning 6 straight. Typically, he bounces back with phenomenal years. Phil's motivated, right, Coach? Because
yes, he is.
He's not going to be happy. He is not going to be happy with the results. So, Erica, they're going to have to go to the portal. They're going to have to play young guys next year. But I would not bet against Phil Parker, and that's what Iowa fans can bank on. I think.
Oh, I'm not betting against him. I'm just a little bit concerned. That's all.
There's reason. There's nothing wrong with being concerned, but there's also reason to be positive based on history with Phil.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask, and this is specifically for Coach, since he's got, he worked for Hayden Fry and everything. He's got connections in the program and that. How much did Hayden Fry influence what calls were made? And the reason I ask that is one thing I can't shake off, and this was alluded to earlier in the broadcast, is Kirk seems to play not to lose versus plays to win. He lets his foot off the gas. And I'm just wondering, why is that? Why does that seem to be a pattern? Why does it seem to happen? And I'm wondering how Hayden, compared to that. It didn't feel like Hayden did that as much. And it also doesn't feel like Hayden was as risk adverse.
I think a lot of people would support that followed the program closely back in the 80s and 90s. Hayden he earned a reputation as a pretty aggressive play caller. We utilized waste downs fairly routinely. We picked our spots. We didn't always use them, of course. You can't get by with that. We might just to give you an idea of how we thought about it. We might recognize that over these last 2 games, we haven't used any waste downs, and we're not going to use them next week either unless we have to, simply because 2 weeks from now, we're going to play a team in which we need to be able to utilize waste downs. So my point, Erica, is maybe recent history says we don't use them. We know that. We've chosen not to use them because we want to fill not this next team, but the one that follows. Mm-hmm. That's how far ahead. A good play caller it's like a big game of chess. You're always at least 1 move ahead of the opponent.
Right.
And that's an example of how we would know what our tendencies are. Another example would be 3rd and short. 3rd and short, we self-scout too. We know what our run-pass tendencies are on 3rd and short, and realizing that we've got a big game coming up in 3 weeks, we want to see if we can, the next 3 weeks, not throw any play action on 3rd and short, because we've already made up our mind to beat this team that's 4 weeks away. We have to have that as part of our game plan is play action on 3rd and short. You follow me? We're giving them a distorted look at what we do on 3rd and short.
Yeah, because we have to be strategic, right? We can't always call the same play. Otherwise, we end up like we were, frankly, the last few years under Brian, where we knew exactly what he was going to call. Everybody did. It was no secret. Whereas I think Tim Lester is a lot more creative in his play calling than Brian was, which is no shocker because, Brian's not an OC. Like, he's not a quarterback coach like Lester is. There's a big difference there.
Well, I identify well with Tim Lester. I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. You're probably not aware, Erica, but when he first came out of college and finished his time in professional football, one of his early jobs was to coach high school football and teach math.
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm a math person too. Numbers are always floating around in my head. How many people are watching TV and all of a sudden they're thinking about 72 times 68?
Right.
That's something I might do. I know that doesn't even make sense. But I've just got an analytical mind, and I've got a mind that's always addressing numbers and percentages.
Yeah.
I've been accused of being a card counter in blackjack. That's not true, but I do know percentages really, really well on blackjack, and that's why I have a chance to not lose too much money if I ever decide to play more blackjack.
Yeah. So going back to my previous question, though, I'm really curious, why is it that Kirk is so risk adverse? Like, why we were 4th and inches and like 4th and short a few times against Maryland and he didn't go for it. And I know that some people are like, oh, Lester, is making the calls or whatever, but on those calls, we know that Kirk is making those calls.
But real quick, Erica, let me just butt in there. Don, you said a number of times, head coaches in critical down situations may say run, pass.
Absolutely.
That's normal for critical down situations, correct, Don?
I don't know that Kirk's doing that, but he certainly might be because that's what head coaches often do. They don't specify the play. They simply tell the play caller, I want to go pass, take a shot, or run the ball. It might be that specific. 3 words, run the ball. And you know what that means. You better call a run, and he's going to lean on you. You pick the best run. I'm not going to tell you what run to use. I'm simply going to tell you, choose the best run.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Kirk is telling Tim exactly what to call, as far as, run this way or, do it this way or whatever. I'm not saying to that extent. I'm just saying, why is it that we never take any risk? Like,
well, a game like that,
I understand that sometimes, we're injured right now, for example. I understand that. And Stratton is like our only not injured quarterback at this point.
What would they have gained by taking a 4th and inches risk yesterday?
They would have gained the possibility to have another first down and keep going down the field.
They won by 2 scores.
Yeah, but they weren't up 2 scores when that happened.
Well, I think the answer is, whether you agree with the philosophy, it's been consistent for 25 years. Kirk is going to play the field position game always. And, I knew it heading into the game, Erica. I'm like, 4th and 1, he's going to punt every time. So,
and that's fine, but why can't he change it? Why can't he modernize his game in that way?
Well, I agree in bigger games, but I mean, I do believe that if this season if Iowa was sitting at 2 losses, I would have wanted him to do exactly what he did yesterday, because that was the most logical path to victory yesterday. But in bigger games, I agree with you. I don't think he's good at pivoting in bigger games when you're playing Ohio State, when you're playing Penn State, and pivoting in those games and realizing when to be aggressive and when not to. I don't think he's good at that. I think he's really good playing in his vision, with his vision of football. He's really good at it. That's why he's won so many games.
I think that's why we struggle against like top competition like Ohio State, because we're not willing to take those risks.
I agree. Part of the absolutely.
And that's been his downfall.
I don't think he called for that yesterday. Is all I'm saying.
I'm talking more in general. I just brought up yesterday because it's most on the mind. It's just the most recent thing that happened.
Sure.
But like, that's why we aren't competitive against the top dogs, because he won't take a risk. Like, if you're already down that many scores, why not? What do you have to lose then?
By the way, Erica, do you have anything to say to the other Corey, the caller that likes to take shots at you when he's on the air?
No, I'm not in the mood to take any shots, frankly. I don't.
I was giving you an opportunity. I was giving you a small toss there.
I don't. I mean, I listened. I was here for his call, but I mean, I was chatting, frankly, and
Well, he was a little more docile today. He was kind of coming after the haters yesterday. He was being his apologetic self yesterday for Kirk, and that's fine.
he has the right to his opinion.
Absolutely.
Absolutely has the right to his opinion. That's fine. But I'm not going to argue just to argue. But one thing I did want to comment on was the tight end conversation, because I've been thinking about that, over the course of the season as well. Like, why aren't we calling more tight end stuff? And part of it was that for a portion of the season, our best tight ends were indeed injured, right? So that's part of it. But I think another part of it is when you have a dominant running game, you don't necessarily need to call on them so much or so often. And also, I also think that someone in the chat said this, and I thought about it, and I think they're right. Lester, if you look at how he coached in the past, he's always preferred wide receivers, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense that our tight ends aren't getting called upon as much.
Yeah, the system is probably going to be a little less conducive toward tight end production. So
yeah,
not to say that it'll be interesting to see how scouts still view the guys Iowa brings in and how it affects recruiting. I think Lachey's a draftee. I think they really like Ortworth and Nostringa. All these guys have a chance to be drafted at some point. That's just what history tells you about starting tight ends at Iowa.
That's true, but you have to think about the O-line conversation too, because it used to be all about Iowa and O-line were synonymous, but that's kind of faded away a little bit, and I fear that might happen with tight ends. But who knows? Maybe not. I mean, I think that Lester likes Ostrenga. He tends to go to him quite a bit. It feels like more than any other tight end.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of that is availability. He's been one. Well, he was hurt earlier this year.
Yeah, he was hurt too, right?
Yeah, but Lachey's kind of coming off an injury. But yeah, he was even getting, I think, just as many targets early in the year. So yeah, I think he's got good hands, good blocking ability, and has a chance to be real good. Him and Zach Ortworth together, I think, have a chance to be a nice tandem next year.
Yeah. I hope we get a good corner out of the portal, though, I have to say. Like, I think we need to hit the portal very, very hard, especially at cornerback and at quarterback as well, both. I think that Sullivan shows some potential, but he's just not. I would like to see us get a quarterback that's more commanding and more dominant. He's a little small. It feels like, I don't know. I'm not a quarterback guru. Coach, maybe you have thoughts on that. Do you think we should go to the portal for a quarterback?
Oh gosh, I think we'd be crazy not to at least explore all that. Yes.
They have to, just because they need numbers, Erica. Like, that's the thing. I mean, unless Marco and Jackson and Brendan all return.
I don't think Marco's going to come back. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because I was really big on Marco, but I just don't see him coming back.
Regardless, first of all, I'd like to see him get some time here. But regardless, they lost Rezar because he transitioned to wide receiver. So they actually are down a guy already.
Right.
Now, if they move Jackson Stratton to a scholarship, maybe they just go get a walk-on if they bring everybody back. But chances are, and history says, they ain't going to bring everybody back.
They're not going to now.
If they don't bring everybody back, they're going to have to go to the portal anyways. You get Jimmy Sullivan in as a freshman, they're going to go to the portal. Now, whether they're going to the portal to get a potential one, a QB1 guy, that's maybe a different story. But it will be cool to see what Lester does in the portal.
This is another thing that, and caller Corey's going to hate me for this comment, but this is another beef I have with Kirk. I still don't think that the quarterback competition was as robust as they'd have us believe this year. I think Cade just won because of default and whatever. I don't know if when he was recruited, if he was promised something. I like to think nobody did that. I'm not saying they did. I don't think that's the case necessarily, but I think there was some favoritism shown there towards Cade. And I want a real quarterback competition. It just doesn't feel like it was robust.
Yeah, I sympathize with you, Erica. You and I both know that there were a lot of reports, and I made the same statement. I had been told on good authority throughout fall camp that it was neck and neck. And
right.
You would think that if it's neck and neck, you give both guys a chance, or you defer toward the younger, more mobile and athletic guy. But
see, exactly right. And Cade with all his injuries, like, it was a liability to have him as QB1 if they were so neck and neck, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I just I hope they don't start Cade again. I'm sorry. No disrespect. He's had spirit. He was great at Michigan, but for all the reasons we've talked about ad nauseum, it just did not work out. And
It did not. Yep.
it did not work out. And I think Stratton's a better bet at this point. I actually really like what I saw from him. I know they kept it kind of simple-ish for him, but I think he's got potential. I said it in the chat earlier. I think he needs development. I think he could be a really good quarterback if he gets developed properly.
Totally agree. Erica, appreciate you calling in as always. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And Coach, if you want to tell a Fry story, wouldn't object.
Thanks, Erica.
I'll try. Right off the top of my head, Erica, I can't think of one that you haven't already heard, but I'll think about it here in these next few minutes. Corey, on that subject of play calling, this might surprise people a little bit, but I want to talk about a specific play. Here's my point. Perception might not be reality. Okay, let me explain. In the game, our first 30 plays were 24 runs and 6 passes, right? You're probably aware of that. They mentioned at the time, 24 runs, 6 passes. Do you know what the next play was? The 31st play. Tell you what it was. 2nd and 1 on the plus 16-yard line. The running back on that play was Terrell Washington. Remember the play?
Looking to pass.
It was going to be a halfback pass.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was a halfback pass.
Oh, yeah, he was clearly looking downfield.
He was looking to throw the ball. He was wise to keep the ball. He might have run for -1 or +1. I can't recall.
And that was called a waist down.
It was a waist down. My point is, sometimes our play calling is a little more aggressive than what people realize. Because I guarantee a lot of people didn't even realize that that was meant to be a halfback pass.
Yeah, and it was mentioned on the broadcast. All right, folks. A couple of super chats, and then we're going to close this thing down. Ask a Bum. Don, what are your thoughts on Tyler Ellsbury?
I don't have a real strong opinion one way or the other. I simply haven't studied him close enough to know.
Like his size, he's a big dude, and seems like he's played well when he's been in there. Hayden Fry says Kirk is a wuss. Interesting. Must be a different Hayden Fry, Don.
Must be.
And Doug wants to know what 8-4 means for the program when Kirk passes Woody. Well, he'll pass Woody in the non-conference next year, assuming things go as expected.
Go ahead, Corey. You want to do it. You want to tell everybody who game 1 is.
I don't even remember. You and I had this conversation. Isn't it like no? Don't give me a second. Give me a second. I know I can picture Albany, the big Danes of Albany, the Albany Danes. Great, can't wait. Cyhawk C Money, thank you for the super chat, Corey. Appreciate that. And let's see here, Carrie. Thank you for the kind words. Always appreciate you being here. And Albany, I'm glad we brought that up. Let's see here. M. Fenn, we already addressed this. End of the third. Why do we run the play clock down, call timeout when we had a chance to run the kicking team onto the field, preserve the timeout? Well, they were trying to save. There's okay running the timeout, but call it early, and then you get an extra couple of plays with the win in your favor.
Yeah, the mistake we made, we took the clock down. We burned the timeout with 4 seconds left. It made sense, of course, to use the timeout so that you could kick with the wind. But the mistake was call the timeout earlier. And here's the bottom line, Corey. The wind was a huge factor in the third quarter. Let's make that third quarter last as long as possible. So what should have happened, call the timeout immediately. Maybe there was at least 30 seconds left at the time, I think. That would allow us to kick the field goal, kick off through the end zone. Now they start on the 25, and maybe they even have to throw once or twice into the wind before that third quarter elapsed.
Right.
A quicker timeout would have forced them to do all that. And the fact that we waited until 4 seconds left, when the ball went through the uprights, the clock was on 0, it meant we had to kick into the wind. You probably remember what happened on the kickoff.
Sure.
The ball was hooked into the wind. Went out of bounds. They got it on the 35.
Yeah, it didn't actually go out of bounds, but the guy was standing out of bounds. Smart play by the kick returner, by the way.
Very smart play because the ball was and died on the field. You're right.
Right. Corey, Kirk is the winningest coach in Iowa history. Yeah, rah, rah, rah. They just know the passion, the fire he's got within him in saying that. Anyways, Doug, he says, I wish we had one men's basketball show that had half as much passion as these football shows have. I feel like I'm the lone basketball guy. I'm sorry, Doug. First of all, my condolences to you. I don't want you to be sad. That sounds like a very sad comment. We had a good Friday postgame show, Doug, and you were on the postgame show. but the men have to start winning more games. That sounds cliche, but they got to start winning games. We all know about the March thing. That game Friday is not going to help the way they lost that game. Missing threes, missing free throws, turning the ball over. You just can't. Actually, they didn't turn the ball over. No, they missed free throws and missed threes, and they got killed on the glass. That's not going to help. But I understand, Doug. I totally understand. Spaceboy says that he's sorry, but his wife lets him hang out with Corey and Don, but she won't let him hang out with Corey and Gary. So, again, is what it is. Doug, we do appreciate you being here. And let's see. I think the last thing, Tacoon says, what are your keys to game to beat Nebraska on Friday, Don? Final thoughts on the big Black Friday showdown, senior night in Kinnick Stadium this coming Friday.
Before I address that, let me just say this. Erica's comment, they have to win more games. And your comment was basically the same thing. That's all true. I flash back on the fact, right after I became the head coach at Western Illinois, we were at the convention that year, and somebody was congratulating me on getting that head coaching opportunity. And he said, I want to warn you, though, this was a head coach, too, at the time. He said, from this point forward, you're going to have 2 numbers after your name in all kinds of places. You be sure that first number is bigger than the second number. Otherwise, you won't get to do it very long. And that's good advice. You better not assume that it's going to be okay for me to have a losing record going forward.
Problem is, Fran hasn't had many losing records, but the problem has been even when they've had good records, they flame out when it's tourney time. And so then there's less patience for the regular season lumps that they have to take. And again,
when I say winning records, I'm talking about conference play. I'm not talking about a bunch of fluff in the non-conference schedule. That's one of my complaints about college basketball in general, is they have a lot of non-conference games, and typically so many teams don't play a very difficult schedule, and they pile up all kinds of wins non-conference, and yet it doesn't prepare you very well for conference play.
Look at Mark bringing the fire. He says, in response to the earlier comment from Cyhawk C Money, Kirk Ferentz is the losingest coach in the history of Iowa football. 123 losses, Hayden Fry 89. That's kind of a shot back, man. That's a shot back here on the show. He's stating a fact, right? He's stating a fact, but wow, I didn't expect that from Mark. He's still hanging out, so that's again bringing the fire, bringing the facts. Don, Iowa, Nebraska, Friday night on NBC.
Well, I haven't done the analytics from this past weekend. I've looked at them, glanced at them, but in short summary, one of the things we need to do, Nebraska's been notorious for not taking care of the details. You heard me say one of the nice things about Iowa is normally if you beat us, we make you have to beat us. Nebraska, as you know, Corey, last year and even this year to some degree, has shot themselves in the foot quite a bit. So first thing comes to mind, let's find a way to force Nebraska to make some mistakes. They do have a freshman quarterback. Yes, he's got a bright future, but isn't he a little more likely to make mistakes than a more veteran quarterback would? The answer is obvious, yes, that's true. Other places where he could gain an edge is our defense maybe more opportunistic than Nebraska's. I'd like to think so. I think it's probably safe to say we probably have more experience on defense than they do. I don't know that for a fact, but we have good experience in our starting lineup, of course. We do have the home field advantage. I think this is critical. We have to have a great home field advantage, and the players alone don't get that done. The fans have so much to do with that. I know it's going to be hard on a cold night. We got to bundle up. We got to find a way to make a lot of noise in the course of the game. Let's be sure that Kinnick advantage is there, as it almost always is. And let's recognize those players deserve that kind of support out of our crowd. It is senior day. These seniors will never again get to play in Kinnick Stadium. Let's send them off on the right note. And that's a responsibility that every last fan should embrace. Having said all that, I'd like to win on turnovers. We should be able to get that done. Nebraska historically has turned the ball over more than we have. Hope that continues this next Friday night. And then beyond that, to help knowing who we are, we need to certainly outrush Nebraska. We should get that done. And that'll, of course, give us a better chance to shorten the game and keep their offense off the field more than maybe what they'd like to be out there. If you snap the ball 75 times, you got a better chance to make big plays than if you only snap it 60. That only makes sense, of course. And but that's just stuff off the top of my head, of course. It's not based on a lot of analytics yet. I haven't really done a deep dive on, and just to give you an idea of what I do, Corey, this time of the year, I do what I call a bowl evaluation on both teams. And so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to look at every conference game played by Nebraska, every conference game played by Iowa, and then I'm going to start looking how many of these 25 parameters that I address, how many of them, are there any of them that might be, right now we both played 8 conference games, right? You're talking about 16 games. Are there any of those parameters that are 16 for 16? And all I'm saying is, are any of them 100% win if you win the parameter? That's an indication you better win that parameter. Maybe there is, maybe not. I'm going to figure it all out, and I'm going to share that information with Iowa, and I hope Nebraska didn't have anybody that's that involved to do the same thing on their side. Even if they are, I don't think they know as much about analytics as I do. So advantage is still to Iowa. That sounds like I'm shooting my own horn. I'm sorry, but I just take my work very seriously. I think you know that.
There's a reason why your name is in the title of this show. So just remember that. Iowa, Nebraska, Friday, under the lights, Kinnick Stadium, Black Friday, Game 12, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on NBC, and it will be fun. It will be less boring than the 11 a.m. game in College Park that we watched yesterday. For Coach Don Patterson, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Stay tuned and tune in Friday night for post-game coverage. We'll have to kind of recap men's football and, of course, women's basketball as well, because we'll have a game that's running parallel with the football team. So maybe we'll get Kashin to hop on with us for a few minutes. Looks like a late super chat from Erica. Last question, Don. Did Nebraska look good because they played a horrible Wisconsin team, or should we really be concerned?
Well, I think the Wisconsin fans would tell you that they're a little bit of a hot mess right now. I say that simply because Phil Longo loses his job a couple of weeks ago, and they're trying to salvage a disappointing season. Correct me if I'm wrong, Corey. They're 5-6 right now. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yeah, I believe you're right.
I think they're both 5-5.
They got to win this
week. So they got to win. Otherwise, they might be a bowl team at 5-7, I guess, because we can't fill bowl teams with just 6-6 teams. I guess we got to go 5-7 in a few spots.
Obviously,
that's another problem. Too many bowl games.
Too many bowl games. As they become less and less relevant, we just keep adding more bowl games. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, folks, myself and Coach Patterson following the game. Tune in right here. And, of course, all of our shows on audio. Donate to the show. Subscribe, like, all those things. Please support our sponsors, folks. It's really important that you do that now over never or even your attempt to do it later. Do it now, because we've got season wrapping up on Friday, and they've been with us throughout, and they've been a big help and helped this show to go. For Coach Patterson, I'm Corey Brada. We'll talk to you very soon right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm.